From a UFO that analysts have claimed was just a weather balloon to mysterious flying objects appearing and disappearing within a matter of seconds, we take a look at 13 of the most mysterious UFO sightings ever. Number 13. Mariana Incident. In 1950, on the night of August 15th, small-time baseball manager Nick Mariana turned into the first individual to catch film footage of a UFO. It happened as he was inspecting the diamond before a game in Great Falls, Montana, which has since become a hotbed of UFO sightings and is close to a U.S. Air Force base. Mariana was able to capture two bright dots streaking across the sky on a 16mm movie camera, which he says he routinely kept in his car. After sending the film to be developed, he started to contact local daily newspapers, significant as he had not yet seen the developed film, and so would not have known if any fakery looked convincing. In October, he wrote a letter to the Air Force and was interviewed at Maelstrom Air Force Base. Number 12. Maury Island Incident. Sailor Harold Dahl experienced a run-in with the real Men in Black after claiming to have seen 6 UFOs while scavenging for driftwood in Washington's Puget Sound. The next day, he was approached by an unknown black-suited individual who warned him off, repeating his story with threats against his family. However, it's unclear whether the UFO incident was actually real or a secret military exercise which had gone wrong. Number 11. Carson Sink Incident. 2 senior military pilots asserted to have spotted 3 flying aircrafts of an unknown type to them while flying in a North American B-25 Mitchell bomber over the Carson Desert. They said the 3 unidentified objects were moving around 3 times quicker than their B-25s. While the B-25s weren't known to be an especially quick machine, both men insisted that the 3 crafts were not a new kind of super-fast jet. 60 years later, the sighting is still officially classified as unexplained. Number 10. The Battle of Los Angeles. This picture depicts searchlights and anti-craft shells converging on a UFO amid what would later be known as the Battle of Los Angeles. Though visually stunning, this image is almost certainly not evidence of extraterrestrials. Most analysts believe this was a mix of heightened tensions with the Japanese and a weather balloon. It's likewise worth pointing out that despite the fact that the object took direct hits from ballistics, it never fell from the sky. Number 9. McMinnville Incident. In Oregon, in May of 1950, an agriculturalist named Mr. Trent saw a UFO at his farm outside McMinnville. According to Mr. Trent, his wife Evelyn initially spotted the object, a shimmering metallic disc. She was outside feeding her rabbits when it showed up in the early night sky. She shouted to her husband, who came outside and looked for several minutes. He then went and got a camera and took 2 pictures before the object sped off towards the west. Number 8. Socorro Encounter. On April 24, 1964, several witnesses in different parts of Socorro, New Mexico, reported distinctive sightings of the same event. Some saw a low-flying object in the sky. Some heard loud sounds reminiscent of the takeoff and landing of a powerful craft. But one man swears he actually saw it land and that it could only have been an alien spacecraft. His name was Lonnie Zamora, and it was such an astonishing encounter that it distracted him from the high-speed chase he had been engaged in when he first caught sight of the craft. At the time of the sighting, Mr. Zamora was an on-duty Socorro police officer. Number 7. The Westall UFO. On April 6, 1966, in Melbourne, Australia, witnesses say a silver disc-shaped craft was spotted zooming around, and then it landed in a paddock near a high school and took off again. It would be a somewhat typical report of the type that is normally just a prank or a misidentification of something else, except this incident was observed by over 200 people in broad daylight, and no explanation has ever been offered. Number 6. The Portage County Chase. According to Project Blue Book, half a dozen or so police officers chased a communications satellite, and after they lost sight of that, they chased the planet Venus into the Ohio Wild and over the state line into Pennsylvania in the pre-dawn hours of April 17, 1966. When this official report was released, the police officers involved had a less than receptive response. In fact, they were infuriated by the insinuation that they could be that stupid. Number 5. Chicago O'Hare Incident. When several people state flatly that they observed a saucer-shaped aircraft hovering around before bolting into the sky at incredible speeds, it is tempting to assume that they do not know much about aircrafts. But when such an incident occurred in Chicago in 2006, it was pretty difficult to make that case. It took place at O'Hare International Airport, and most of the people who saw it were United Airlines employees. No airline officials, air traffic controllers, or radar records indicated anything out of the ordinary, though a United supervisor did call the tower to ask if any saucers were hovering nearby. The FAA has declined to investigate, which has proved irritating to those who insist that they witnessed the incident. Officials have tossed out the usual balloons, optical illusions, and weather phenomena as possible explanations. Number 4. Trans-en-Provence Incident. The French version of NASA records UFO sightings somewhat more diligently than its American partner. The incident that occurred at Trans-en-Provence in January 1981 has been called the most carefully documented sighting of all time. While the incident doesn't seem spectacular at first glance, its simplicity leaves little room for interpretation. Retired farmer Renato Nicolai was working in his garden when he heard a sudden shrieking sound, joined by the appearance of something that he thought to be an experimental aircraft. In broad daylight, he watched as a saucer-shaped craft between 5 and 6 feet in diameter dropped out of the sky, stopping to hover for half a minute about 2 meters off the ground. Then it rose into the sky, a plume of dust in its wake. Nicolai was about 30 meters away. Number 3. Warren Air Force Base. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, has been the site of various alleged UFO appearances since 1965, when red and green flashing lights reported by civilians in the area had local missile sites like Warren on high alert. In a famous 1976 incident reported by a retired Minuteman missile launch officer, a bright white object with blazing red and blue lights was seen towards the north. Guards positioned at the base watched the object, a cigar-shaped craft a little under 20 meters in length, moving close to the missile silos. Military and police personnel frantically converged on the site, by which time the craft had disappeared. Number 2. Edwards Air Force Base Sighting. One can't accuse the Air Force for being sensitive about matters involving UFOs. In 1957, one supposedly arrived at Edwards Air Force Base. If that seems like a crazy myth, remember that it was allegedly caught on film and was reported by Gordon Cooper, a test pilot and astronaut in the United States First Manned Space Program. He was at Edwards supervising the installation of a new precision landing system at the time, and his account of the occurrence was really unambiguous. Number 1. Piney Woods Incident. One December night in 1980, friends Betty Cash and Vicki Landrum, alongside Vicki's grandson Colby, were driving along a desolate highway through the piney woods of Texas when they saw something none of them would ever forget. The three came up on a water tower-sized, glowing diamond-shaped object in the middle of the highway, blocking their way. Flames periodically shot from its underside, making it rise slightly before settling back down. It radiated intense light and heat. The two women exited the vehicle to examine the object and would later say that they had to use their coats to avoid being burned on the door handles when they re-entered their vehicle. As they watched the UFO ascend, one or two military-style helicopters buzzed overhead, surrounding it. A Dayton police officer also confirmed seeing helicopters of this type near the same area at the time. The women drove on, watching the craft and helicopters recede into the distance.